Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this important webinar. My name is Dr. Ashley Idris, and I'm a policy specialist in the education program at the National Conference of State Legislatures. On behalf of NCSL, I would like to welcome all of you to today's webinar titled The Principal Supervisor Initiative Implementation on the Ground Work. For those of you who don't know, the National Conference of State Legislatures is a bipartisan organization that serves the legislators and legislative staff from all states, commonwealths, and territories. NCSL provides research, technical assistance, and opportunities for policymakers to exchange ideas on the most pressing state issues. Today's webinar is a platform for information exchange. We are aiming to make our 60 minutes together as interactive as possible. Feel free to type your questions at any point in the Q&A box, which you'll see at the bottom left-hand side of the screen, and specify which speaker you're addressing your question to. Given the wonderful content within this presentation, we will save time at the end to answer all questions. If we run out of time for questions, we will save them, respond to all, and then send them out later. I also want to briefly mention the resources. At the top of right of your screen, you'll see an icon that looks like a square piece of paper with the play button on it. As you mouse over this icon, you will see the words, Show My Media Library. If you click on this icon, you will be able to access a PDF of the slide deck and any other relevant handouts. For access to all URLs within the presentation, I welcome you to access and download the PDF, where you can easily then visit the links we've included. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on NCSL website by next week as a video archive. Today's webinar is the first of its kind, looking at the implementation of the Wallace Foundation's Principal Supervisor Initiative in the Long Beach Unified School District. Today we are going to hear from 3 experts about their experience with the Principal Supervisor Initiative, from the vision to the system. Our 3 experts have worked within varying roles within the Principal Supervisor Initiative. In just a moment, I'll turn over the webinar over to our presenters, but first, I want to give you some additional information about who you'll be hearing from today. First, we will have Dr. Jill Baker. She is the Deputy Superintendent of Schools. Dr. Kelly Ahn, she is the Director of Leadership, and Lachelle Diggs, the Principal of Riley Elementary. We will now hear from Dr. Baker. Dr. Baker, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thanks for asking us to share our story. It feels important to us because we've learned in Long Beach Unified that sharing our story is actually a form of learning for us. And I also want to acknowledge that we represent districts across the nation, especially those in the Wallace Principal Supervisor Initiative who are working to improve outcomes for students, especially in new ways, new thinking and new ways of developing people, with a focus on effective principals and principal supervisors. We're fortunate that we came into this work after almost a decade of focusing on our principal pipeline, which really poised us to be ready to think about principal supervisors in our district and how we could enhance our impact on student achievement through our principal supervisors' work with principals. And as has been mentioned, we were incredibly fortunate to have outreach from the Wallace Foundation, who invited us to apply for a significant grant, who has invested several $1 million into our work over 4 years. And I guess in kicking off, I'll say that we feel that we're a different district than we were before we began this work. And so we're excited to share a little bit about that story. I'm just going to say just a little bit more about the team who you'll hear from today. One uniqueness that the 3 of us represent is, and it tells you a little bit about Long Beach Unified, is that we have all grown up in Long Beach Unified. We've all come up the system starting as either college aides or teachers into a teaching career, into administration. And that is something that is unique in Long Beach Unified. We have a number of administrators and leaders that have served, including our superintendent, who has come all the way up through the system. Lachelle has been a principal for 18 years at the elementary and K-8 level. After working as a teacher and an HR administrator, I'll describe her as an avid learner, a mentor and a coach to other principals, and a humble leader. She's also the mom of 2 girls, a college freshman and a kindergartner. So needless to say, she keeps very busy. Dr. Kelly you're going to hear about our leadership development work. She began her career as a college aide and then was a teacher before going into administration. She served as a successful principal at elementary and K-8, and she became a principal supervisor just as we launched our Principal Supervisor Initiative. You'll hear a lot from her, but she now leads our leadership development programs. She's also the mom of a darling elementary-age daughter and manages to stay highly involved in her daughter's life while managing a busy career. And I have served the Long Beach Unified School District for 27 years as teacher, then principal, and 15 years as a central office leader. And I say without pause that being a principal was the most amazing job. Although I have loved my work since then, being a principal was a most amazing job, which is also why I love the work in support of our principals. The only thing that got me to leave the principalship and come to central office was the desire to build a leadership development program, which you'll hear us talk briefly about the impetus for that. Now I support multiple central office divisions. I am a coach to others, and I'm often the convener of cross-departmental problem-solving or work groups. I also have a son who came all the way up through Long Beach Unified School District and graduated this past June. He's a college freshman, and so I'm experiencing empty nest at my house for those of you who have experienced that. So today's presentation that we have developed is to hear from Lachelle, who's going to help paint the before and after picture of our work from the firsthand perspective of being a principal and a participant in our leadership development programs. Then you'll also have a chance to hear how Kelly has led the development of our extended leadership pipeline beyond the principalship and how she effectively runs 12 pipeline programs and lives to tell about it. And then I'm also proud to share about some of our new ways of thinking about the work in schools and ways that we're thinking about learning as leaders and some of the innovations we're trying specific to principal supervisors that is new to our work in Long Beach Unified. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the incredible research of the Wallace Foundation and just a single slide that really doesn't capture enough about their work, but just to say a few things about our colleagues at the Wallace Foundation. So they have been studying leadership for much longer than the Principal Supervisor Initiative, but dating back into their leadership journey and working on the principal pipeline, they started to really think about what the impact of principal supervisors could have on principals. So the research around impact on principals and developing an effective principal pipeline pointed them toward more work around principal supervisors. And the most recent research is surfacing the importance of principal supervisors and how the shifting role, which you'll specifically hear today Lachelle talk about, the specific role based on the Council of Chief State School Officers model principal supervisor standards is positively impacting principals in their work. And moving from a compliance-oriented role to one of coaching and support. The research is pointing towards principals needing support from principal supervisors, including relevant evaluation practices in order to maximize their impact. And you'll hear us talk about in Long Beach Unified how we blend the concept or the system of evaluation, but we approach it from a very deep coaching perspective. Another highlight of the Wallace research is a focus on strengthening teaching and learning. So you'll hear our transition from being more operationally oriented in talking and supporting principals to being much more focused on teaching and learning. And then lastly, just a highlight is that in the research, 86% of principals in 6 urban districts who were advised to improve received support to do so from their supervisors. So when we talk about evaluation and coaching, we're talking about all of that essentially in one package of support and guidance to a principal. So the Long Beach context, for those who are not familiar with it, I'll be brief and hopefully this slide gives you a good overview of our district. We have 83 schools and we're fortunate to live in a city that is wonderfully diverse. We're about 25 miles or 20 miles south of Los Angeles, but actually a very different city than Los Angeles. just in terms of city politics and the way that we have a really just robust relationship with our city officials and our universities, and really have developed a lot of our programs based on these relationships. About 60% of our students are Hispanic, about 12% African American, 12% white, and 7% of Asian descent. We have more than 40 languages spoken in our city, and about 38% of our students are either currently English learners or have been redesignated English learners. And about 2/3 of our students live in poverty, which really calls upon us to think about things from an equity lens and advancing the closure of the achievement gap. And last point I'll make on this slide is just that our schools range from 280 students to 4,000 students, and from very small degrees of poverty, so a school that has less than 5% of the students living in poverty, to schools that have 100% of the students living in poverty. And I highlight that just to say that principal supervisors in support of principals have to know a lot of different things and a lot of different ways to differentiate and interact with schools in order to be effective. So to the question, why focus on leadership? So while we've known for almost a decade that leadership, based on research, leadership is second only to classroom instruction as an influence on student learning, it has been a more recent finding from the research that the work that is done to support principals also has an impact on student achievement, especially through the work to improve teaching and learning. So as I've mentioned, we'll be forever indebted to the Wallace Foundation for coming to us at just the right time. We were in the stage of preparing to deploy a new principal supervision or evaluation system that we designed from within. In the shared file resources for today's webinar, there's actually a PDF of our current principal evaluation handbook that will give you lots of details about what that system looks like. So at that point, the focus on principal supervision was truly a match because it allowed us to bring principal supervisors together around a common set of expectations in our work with principals. We also have had a couple of what I'll call watershed moments that help to shape our work to develop leaders in Long Beach Unified School District. During one of our 5 Broad Prize visits around 2003, we received some critical feedback that caused us to pause. We were acknowledged for the incredible work that we were doing to build teacher capacity, and we were asked about our strategies to develop leaders. That's where the pause came in. Because while we're a district that has had a long tradition of growing our own, and that's why I started describing that Kelly and Michelle and I all 3 of us have grown from within the system, we had not developed an intentional strategy around the development of leaders. We just relied on bringing teachers into administrative positions without a lot of development. So the feedback that we received at that time really changed the course of history for us. Beginning in 2004, as I mentioned, I had the pleasure of being a part of our initial work to create a leadership pipeline. You'll hear a lot about the pipeline programs from Kelly, but suffice it to say that our pipeline programs are part of the fabric of LBUSD now and are truly a critical lever in our continued success as a district. You'll probably at some point in the presentation hear us refer to different aspects of our work as the Long Beach Way. And as we begin today, the 2 aspects of work I just want to mention are our focus on teaching and learning and our organizational culture, especially listen in for how we talk about coaching as part of the organizational culture. The Long Beach Way is really, I'll describe it as a long-standing focus on teaching and learning, a culture of high expectations, and most definitely a system of continuous improvement. So a little bit about the journey before I pass on to my colleagues in the room. This next slide really gives you a broad stroke of some phases of our journey, and we think that they're represented in this slide. The early years, and I'm going to overlap a little bit on the boxes, but just give you a little narrative. The early years between 2014 and 16 represent what we think of as visioning and new beginnings. We coined the term from Michael Fulham, or not coined the term, took the term from Michael Fulham, systemness, because we felt that there was a new way of being of systemness emerging Our K-12 principal evaluation system was causing new conversations among principal supervisors and principals, which was helping us to really accelerate the idea of the systemness and developing systems. It also unified our group of principal supervisors around a common need, and then the Wallace Grant supported new professional learning opportunities for our leaders. So we had never had a focus on professionally developing principal supervisors until this journey began. The phase between 2016 and 17, I think, can be characterized as evolving systems and practice. We had rewritten a job description for the role of principal supervisor. We had actually inducted new principal supervisors and began to build consistency of practice in our coaching of principals. We also initiated some new structures, one in particular called Lab Day. You have an example of that in the shared files. You have one of the protocols from last year, a Lab Day last year. And that structure is specifically designed to support the development of principal supervisors. The last phase that you see on our slide has allowed us to stretch our wings. Based on the systems and the consistency that we built, we've now worked really hard to differentiate support to principals, either based on the needs of their school or based on their leadership needs. We've increased our coaching skill set with a focus on equity, so additional coaching training that is more of a laser-like focus on equity and not just generalized coaching practice. And we've been able to consider individual growth areas for each of us as leaders. It's also been a rapid development time for our leadership development programs, which you'll hear both Kelly and Michelle talk about in just a moment. So the then and now is significant. What are the tangible differences? Well, we are at an 11-to-1 ratio with all principal supervisors focused on support to principals. And while the ratio doesn't look significantly different when you glance from left to right, there's something that doesn't show up in this description, and that is the then, when we were at 14-to-1, we also had most principal supervisors leading other district departments, making their job as principal supervisor just a part-time job for them. And now we are in the phase of having pure positions. So our principal supervisors, they are entirely focused on support to principals. The focus role of principal supervisor also now allows for considerable time in schools, both supporting principals and walking alongside them to assess the ongoing needs of their students and teachers. And the result of this is not only is it improving instruction, the quality of teaching and learning, there's also what we think of as a cascading effect. It's central office leaders who can speak on behalf of schools in a way that they could not in the past. They can advocate for the needs in the system, and they can bring incredible voice to issues of equity, and in many cases, some of our district-level barriers that we did not know existed or did not have the capacity to address until now with the different role of principal supervisor. So Michelle's going to give you a first-hand perspective from a principal on the then and now related to our vision to system.
Okay. Good afternoon. As a veteran principal, I have experienced this shift in principal supervisors spending significantly more time on my campus, and specifically walking alongside me to support teaching and learning on my campus. In addition to that, we now have a new principal evaluation rubric framework, which allows me to have a focused, ongoing conversation about the areas of my performance with my supervisor that I'm currently working on. I can remember a time when I didn't see my principal supervisor very often, and my communication with him or her was more focused on operational issues than it was on supporting me as an instructional leader at the site. Lastly, I would like to take a moment to talk about coaching as a way of being in LBUSD. While at one point in our journey, coaching was sequestered to formalize relationships, we have taken coaching training to scale because we believe it improves every relationship between adult to adult and adult to student. Now all principal supervisors are trained in coaching, and we have built coaching into the professional development that all principals and all central office leaders receive as part of our ongoing professional learning.
So we're often asked, what are the things that principal supervisors do when they're in the field as this role has shifted? And so this is actually just a visual out of the Principal Evaluation Handbook. And I'll just briefly give you a glimpse into the K-12 evaluation system. In Long Beach Unified, our evaluation system is a process that's built on coaching methodology, as you heard Lachelle say, and you'll hear Kelly talk about. And that's part of the reason that we've made this really intentional investment in coaching at all levels. So the graphic before you describes a cycle that all of our principals move through with their principal supervisor. It's the standard cycle. If a principal is being evaluated, it culminates in an evaluation. If it's not an evaluation year for that principal, they have a modified version of these 6 things that are in front of you. So it starts with a goal setting, which is a one-on-one time spent between principal and principal supervisor. It feels like collaboration. It looks like data analysis together, where school goals and leadership goals are agreed upon, specific to the school site and specific to the principal. Most of the time during the year is spent in ongoing coaching sessions with a focus on teaching and learning. The reference to domains and dimensions that you see on that slide refers to our principal evaluation framework or rubric. And so there's also time spent where the principal and principal supervisor are talking about those 7 domains and the entire practice of a principal and any support or needs within that entire framework. So coaching sessions are a regular part of the work between principal and principal supervisor. It's also the place where differentiation comes out in the relationship. So it may be that one principal has a principal supervisor on their campus multiple times in a month, where another principal has, say, 2 visits from their principal supervisor. The third point is our leadership visits. And that's the opportunity for a principal supervisor to observe authentic school leadership work. It might be watching a principal lead a department meeting, school-wide professional development, leading an aspect of community engagement, but it's an opportunity for authenticity and feedback from the principal supervisor to the principal, as well as reflection by the principal. At the mid-year point, again, there's a one-on-one sit-down meeting so that the principal supervisor and principal can check in on the goals that have been set for the school, especially with a focus on equity. And then the 5th item there is collaborative inquiry visit, and this is our district-wide practice of walking classrooms as teams to assess instructional implementation. It's driven by the goals of the school, but there's a protocol that you can actually see in the Principal Evaluation Handbook that describes the district or the system aspect of it. And then lastly, as I shared, at the end of the year, a principal who's being evaluated has a summary opportunity. There's an agreed upon way that they reflect, and there's a final performance in the one-on-one setting that brings the year to a close. And actually, in our continuous improvement cycle, it actually kicks off the next year. And so once the role of principal supervisor was redefined, and you saw many of the activities that principal supervisors engage with principals on, it really opened up for all new ways and new opportunities for principal supervisors to be in a learning mode. We created a principal supervisor professional learning community that's a place where the focus is on the role of principal supervisors and improving each principal supervisor's ability to do their job effectively based on our district standards for principal supervisors. Those standards you can find in the document that's the Principal Supervisor Handbook that's also in the shared files. Specific learning and collaborating opportunities exist in this PLC. A signature practice of our work has been the development of a lab day structure that's professional development held 4 or 5 times a year, and it's focused on principal supervisor learning. There's an article actually that's named in our closing slide that tells you about the entire protocol, and there's a sample in the shared files. The day includes developing principal supervisors' coaching skills. We use a problem of practice as a way to surface challenges that principal supervisors are facing, especially issues related to equity and some of the systems that they're noticing in their schools. And we try to make it a safe place for principal supervisors to also express their own vulnerability in their work with principals and to be provided coaching support. We regularly meet as collaboration and planning meetings monthly. Those times are used to build consistency and systemness across the work with principals. It's also a place where across levels, so the high school team may be sharing things with the elementary team that they can use. And there are opportunities on an open agenda to really surface and problem solve around issues that the schools are facing. We've also built in some extended collaboration sessions, much like other professional learning communities, but we have not until the last few years had this opportunity for principal supervisors. And then important to all of our growth at the executive level is coaching. We've built instructional coaching and executive coaching that's more disposition oriented, built into the preparation and the ongoing development of principal supervisors. And we've been very intentional about how that coaching is built in, especially to the induction of principal supervisors. And you'll hear Kelly talk about that. So actually I'm going to pass to Kelly, who's going to talk about the extension of our leadership development program.
Well, good afternoon. I'm excited to be able to share with you just a brief glimpse of the work that we do in Long Beach. And so as you heard Jill talk about earlier, coaching or support is really the way of being here in Long Beach. So it's embedded in our work from the teacher leader through the assistant superintendency. And our coaching programs are founded on two main programs which are strengths-based. The first is blended coaching, and the second is evocative coaching, which is founded on appreciative inquiry. The structure and strategies of both coaching programs are woven throughout each of our pipeline programs. And so the graphic you see illustrates our 12 pipeline programs, 2 of which are built into our support for new principals. So our work centers on building the leadership capacity, starting at a teacher leader through assistant principal, a formal coach, and then a director. However, for the purposes of this webinar, our focus is just going to be on the last 3 pipeline programs as they relate to central office preparation and support. So in order to create a bench and expose potential candidates to directorships prior to stepping into the role, we began piloting the 2 highlighted programs 3 years ago. There are 2 main programs that support the preparation of future directors. It's our Aspiring Director Program and our Aspiring Instructional Director Program. The Aspiring Director Program focuses on directorships such as mine in leadership development, human resource services, employee relations, or operations, while our Aspiring Instructional Director Program focuses on principal supervision in each of the level offices. There are 4 main components to both of these programs, and they are goal setting, feedback, shadowing, and then a team project. And so in the goal setting component, participants set goals that extend their leadership action plans beyond the work of their site. So it builds off the work that they're currently engaged in. Another component is feedback. And in order to align with our culture of feedback, we are intentional about building examples that really highlight strengths, but also bring to light areas for growth. So through peer and supervisor observations, along with survey feedback, this guides our conversations and helps us to really develop their leadership potential. Program participants also have the opportunity to participate in various central office experiences. For example, Lab Day, as you heard Jill mention earlier. They're also able to shadow assistant superintendents and directors at levels different from their own. And the final component of our program here focuses on a team project. And so this past year, program participants worked in collaborative groups to design a new department. And they shared strategies learned throughout the program, which were founded on 2 main pieces of text. The first is Robert Marzano's District Leadership That Works, and the second is Michael Watkins' The First 90 Days. And so at this time, I'd like to pass to Lachelle, who's going to share firsthand knowledge about her experience as a program participant.
As a participant in the Aspiring Instructional Director Program, there were a few key learnings that I'd like to highlight. The first, I had the opportunity to shadow district leaders across levels, observing the coaching of principals and seeing how support is differentiated based on the needs of the administrators. For instance, one district leader supported first-year principals and visited their sites more often than veteran administrators, providing more one-on-one coaching and needed support. Secondly, the team project that was mentioned provided the opportunity to work with my colleague on leading a fictitious district department and learning how central office departments collaborate, collect data, identify successful models, define implementation timelines, and evaluate program effectiveness. And third, the professional readings that were mentioned. District Leadership That Works. That book gave me a deeper knowledge of how the district works and the importance of alignment between central office, district departments, and school sites in all areas, specifically goal setting, implementation of district initiatives, and communication and involvement of the community. So overall, it was an invaluable experience for me. I gained a wealth of knowledge and strengthened leadership skills to assist me in my current job with coaching teachers and administrators, and created lots of opportunities to serve in the district, example, our LCAP advisory committee, and providing new principals with support and coaching.
Thank you, Lachelle. The final program that I wanted to take a moment to highlight is called our new Director Onboarding Program. And so once individuals are promoted into a directorship, they go through this program that supports their first year in the position through monthly meetings and interdepartmental collaboration. In addition, the new directors are provided with a mentor who supports their work by assisting in the transition to their new role and helps them broaden their system view from the directorship perspective. There's also an opportunity to have an executive coach outside of our system just to be a thought partner and provide a broader lens to the work. Components of the new Director Onboarding Program also consist of peer calibration visits and front-loading of upcoming key activities. So for example, we'll highlight the goal-setting conferences, we'll walk them through a sample prior to engaging with the rest of our group in our monthly PSI collaboration and planning meetings that Jill mentioned earlier. The structures in this program are intended to ensure consistency and support and ensure a smooth transition from site leadership to central office leadership. So at this time, you'll hear from Dr. Baker regarding the impact this work has had in the field.
Well, the work in the Principal Supervisor Initiative has been really important for us to share with others, and we're constantly, what I say, learning and evolving while we're doing. We've had a couple of different doctoral students come into Long Beach Unified to study our work. We've had executive staff visitors from other districts come to observe, especially Lab Day. We've had the opportunity to share our work through conference presentations and then an article that was published about Lab Day, and just the research that's being conducted as part of the Wallace Grant, which has been terrific for us. And I think I'll go back to where I started. We love the opportunity to share because each time we share, it's cause for us to learn and grow. And I'll end by saying that's the Long Beach way. We think of ourselves in a continuous improvement cycle always, and just as we've learned something new and we feel like we put something into system practice, we're looking for the next iteration of ourselves and our work to build upon. And so that's our story from vision to system today, and we hope you'll have a few minutes to ask questions or to share some things from your perspectives that you represent on this webinar.
Thank you all very much. I'll open this question up to the three of you, and whoever would like to answer, please just jump in. But what would you say has been the most challenging aspect of the Principal Supervisor Initiative?
One of the things that I think about is when you shift the role of any leader, It doesn't just involve that person or a single department. It involves new ways of thinking for other departments and for other leaders in the district. And so there's communication and education that has been important beyond just the department where the principal supervisor lives. And so we've worked at the administrative level to really do an education about the Principal Supervisor Initiative and to help people to see where many aspects, for example, of compliance used to go to the Principal Supervisor, where other places in the organization those things can be handled so that the Principal Supervisor can be very intensely focused on supporting principals, especially with that focus on teaching and learning.
Thank you. Now, I know 2 different styles of coaching were discussed within the webinar. What were the choices behind selecting those 2 styles of coaching?
Great question. So our 2 styles really focus on, we partner with ACSA, and our work initially focused on training administrators in blended coaching. It's based off of Gary Bloom's work. And then, as we've kind of moved forward in the relationship, we just decided alongside ACSA, we've shifted towards evocative coaching, which is more appreciative inquiry-based. I'll say this, we're trying to just broaden the scope and give administrators various tools from which to pull from to coach. There's not just there's not one method that we are, pushing. We're trying to just train them and expose them to multiple ways of coaching.
Thank you. Now, if I may just continue with the coaching question, this will be geared towards Principal Diggs. Have you found that participating in the coaching experience with your principal supervisor has influenced the way you coach your staff?
That's a great question. Yes, it has. Having a system that we all have we have common language with how we coach, and we have a common coaching style in the district. So I know specifically when I'm working with my principal supervisor that she is coaching me. There's questions that are asked and giving me time to think through and coaching me through. And I, in turn, use that same style with coaching my teachers. So it's a really effective model.
Thank you. This question is for Dr. Ahn. You talked about the 2 different pipelines within the leadership department. Has one pipeline shown more success or growth than the other for the participants?
That's a great question. I think that we're rather new early on in it, and so at this point, we're trying to just expose principals to various central office roles because we have a number of directorships. We want folks to be able to see, not just the principal supervision side, but also all of the other directorships and how they interact.
And I would just add anecdotally that we actually have new principal supervisors who came in at the same time, one who had been through the pipeline program and one who had not. And their induction phase actually was very different. And so some of that probably, there's different leadership styles, but I believe that some of it had to do with the preparation program and their ability to quickly come into the role and know what this role was and operate based on the standards that had been set.
Thank you. And just as a final question, for those listening or those interested in implementing something similar to the Principal Supervisor Initiative, what advice would you offer?
Well, I guess I would start by saying to have something as your foundation. So as I told in the story, we had our principal evaluation rubric or our framework as a foundation. That framework and rubric has been used to advance all the different leadership systems. For example, assistant principals, principal supervisors. Now we're doing other leadership positions based on that framework, and so it's given us a foundation of which to build on, and I think that's been a really important aspect of our work.
I think I'd also say just know what your non-negotiables are. So for us in Long Beach, we knew that coaching as a way of being was one of those non-negotiables. And so we've been very intentional and strategic in weaving that through all of our work. And I think that's what we want to really develop folks, not it just be a one-time time that they receive PD, but how do we develop them and continue that support?
And as far as site administrator, one of the things as far as ground up is I understood the role of principal supervisor at the beginning of the initiative. It was very transparent. I knew when my supervisor would come, how often my supervisor would come, and what the role he or she served at my site, specifically with the coaching. So I knew what to expect from the beginning.
That was wonderful. Thank you all so much for taking the time to listen in, and to our experts, thank you very much for sharing all of the knowledge and your experiences. It has been remarkable. I'd like to thank everyone again for listening in. Please remember that an archived copy will be available shortly online. If you have any remaining questions, feel free to connect with me, and I would be happy to help. My email is on the screen right there. As a friendly reminder, please keep in mind that NCSL is here for you. We would be very happy to provide you with additional research, resources, or follow-up information that may be helpful to you in the work that you do in your state or school on leadership issues. Please connect with us. Thank you once again, and enjoy the rest of your day.